Hello, fellow Rebel Capitals. Hope you're well. I am back with my good buddy, Robert Barnes. And my friend, we have a lot to talk about, don't we?
No doubt about that. It's been a eventful summer, that's for sure. I mean, you can say many things about Donald Trump. Boring is not one of them.
Exactly. So let's start right there, because I know you're neck deep in this stuff all the time. And I'm usually focusing on the finance and the macro stuff. But what on earth is going on with this Epstein deal? And Trump, and I mean, maybe take us back over the last 2 or 3 years, kind of a timeline leading like the major events, and then kind of what's going on and how that's going to impact his base and the midterms, if at all.
So Jeffrey Epstein was originally recruited into sort of the gray space, deep state fix-it man for a range of criminal operations, especially those being run by the intelligence community, going all the way back. You could argue to the early 1970s when Donald Barr recruited him to teach at the Dalton School. Donald Barr, the father of Bill Barr, Donald Barr, who was part of OSS and the founding of U.S. intelligence here in the United States. The same Donald Barr who happened to write fiction books portraying oligarchs abusing young women. So maybe all that's a coincidence, maybe not. And in fact, he was at the school at the same time that Anthony Blinken, former Secretary of State, was his father was connected to the school. So it's a small world after all, as George Carlin said, but we're not in it. And you flash forward early 1980s, Epstein all of a sudden shows up he gets fired by Bear Stearns because of his illegal behavior at Bear Stearns, but they then promote him into a whole new deep state role. He's one of the key money launderers to help Iran-Contra go down in the 80s. Becomes a facilitator for fraudsters, Ponzi schemers, all kinds of criminals inside and outside government. In the early 1990s, he hooks up with Les Wexner, the guy who took over Victoria's Secret, the guy who took over the big fashion enterprise, huge Israel-connected individual in the United States. Israeli supporter. And Wexner just gets the idea, why don't I just give my full power of attorney to this Jeffrey Epstein, who I just met? That's the official narrative, at least. So imagine that, George. I guess Jeffrey could have pitched you and said, hey, George, just give me your whole power of attorney for your entire life. And while you're at it, why don't you give me that mansion and that 737 for half price, a quarter of the price, 10% of the price? So
it's probably extortion.
Yeah, that's what most people would say. If Jeffrey Epstein suddenly showed up running your life, George, people would be a little.
Yeah,
he gets caught, pretending to be a model agent for Victoria's Secret, harassing young models in different places in New York. Gets again trying to kidnap somebody in Ohio, gets caught again harassing a woman at the Shutters Hotel in Santa Monica, and yet he keeps dodging the bullet over and over again. He's on the FBI radar on just the sex trafficking side by the 90s. He was on their money laundering radar all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s. So then he finally gets 2002. They write a big Vanity Fair is going to write an expose piece about his history of attacking women, and all of a sudden the editor of the Vanity Fairs basically takes out Vanity Fair, everything that relates to the allegations, and instead ends up in a piece. But young girls in South Florida that live in trailer parks start reporting this serial predator, and some local police get involved. He gets under investigation. The feds magically step in and dismiss everything. They give him a sweetheart deal. He basically, he sleeps at the local jail for about a year, only at night. Otherwise, he's out and about doing whatever he wants, even traveling the world when he's on probation. The feds give him a deal no one's ever heard of before that says, not only will we not prosecute you for any crimes you could have committed, might have committed, thought about committing, we also hereby give you a deal that immunizes everybody, anybody that ever conspired with you, aided and abetted you, facilitated, you name it. They're one of the most absurd deals ever heard of. The person who did it was the then federal prosecutor down in the Southern District of Florida, later becomes labor secretary under President Trump. He gets asked about it. He says that he was told Epstein was an asset of the intelligence community and needed to move that case along.
Wow. And this was early 2000s, Robert?
Yeah, early 2000s. I mean, this was a guy that was on governmental radar for allegations. And I mean, the reason why he got kicked out of the Dalton School was he kept harassing young girls. So this is a guy who's had a habit of this all the way back to the early 1970s. And this is a guy who had no college degree, college dropout, gets a prestigious teaching gig, teaching math at one of the most prestigious schools in all of America. So there were questions about this from day one. Then But what happens is these young women get some aggressive plaintiffs' lawyers. Like whatever you can think about plaintiffs' lawyers, now and then they actually do some good work. And they refuse to give up going after Epstein. So they keep hammering and hammering and hammering, get a federal court to say his plea deal was illegal. And so then under the Trump administration, they re-indict Jeffrey Epstein. As soon as they do, he gets denied bail, and he suddenly ends up dead in a jail cell. In a jail cell that was...
Just to be clear, I know everyone knows it, but the first Trump go-around.
That's correct. This was Trump 1 with Bill Barr as Attorney General, whose father was the one who put Jeffrey Epstein into business in the first place. So there was a lot of suspicion, and a lot of us that had followed aspects of this case for a long time and knew the world in which Epstein operated were very curious about where this was heading. And Maureen Comey, daughter of James Comey, who was connected to Robert Mueller, who was the one to get the Epstein the sweetheart deal before, is the prosecutor assigned Jeffrey Epstein in that case. Gets him denied bail, and he kills himself in a jail cell that was literally physically designed to prohibit people from killing themselves. So it was and the cameras that weren't working outside his jail cell. The people that were monitoring his jail cell fell asleep. The people that they changed and doctored the logs. I mean, all kinds of things that you're like, come on. They do an autopsy, and they said the way in which he died only happens when someone has been murdered and strangled, not when they've hung themselves. All of that gets hushed up very, very quickly. And what happens on a go-forward basis is the case sort of dies out slowly. Then they go back and they indict Ghislaine Maxwell. If you know Ghislaine Maxwell, her father was Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell was the fix-it man before Jeffrey Epstein was the fix-it man. He had ties to the KGB, the Stasi, the Mossad, MI6, and CIA. He corrupted a prominent U.S. senator here, Senator Tower, who was a drunk with a propensity, by the way, for young girls, into helping Israel put spy software into our nuclear military bases. To give you all you got to know about Robert Maxwell is he died under mysterious circumstances too, fell off his boat, drowned, that kind of routine.
What year was that?
This was 1991.
Okay.
He had stolen about $1 billion from the pensioners of the various media publications that he controlled and owned. By the way, he got into business. It was, I think, his ninth name. His actual birth name was Jan Hawk. Born in a small town that's now part of Ukraine, because everything ends up connected somehow to Ukraine. It was Czechoslovakia at the time. He was in Berlin post World War II. The people who put him into business has now been on the record. MI6 was the one who funded his investments to buy these publications. That's how he went from nobody to somebody quick. But where does he get his funeral? He gets an official state funeral, buried at the Mount of Olives in Israel, with every prime minister, president, and leader of their intelligence operations present at his funeral. This is a man who never wasn't born in Israel, never lived in Israel, never a citizen of Israel, didn't die in Israel. And yet Israel gave him a funeral as if he was, the second coming of the founder of Zionism. So it's not a coincidence when Ghislaine Maxwell magically shows up arm in arm with Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, the yacht that he fell off of, Robert Maxwell, was named the Lady Ghislaine after her. So she helps continue the Maxwell gray space fix-it man with the new fix-it man, Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein kills himself. They decide they want to shut up Ghislaine Maxwell. They prosecute her. They prosecute her on unique charges of trafficking to herself. It was like the P. Diddy case, herself into Jeffrey Epstein, nobody else. The guy had cameras all over the place. The guys had obvious blackmail material in everybody, but somehow that's how that wraps up. So she goes to jail. Finally, throughout between 2020 and 2024, the entire podcaster community starts to focus on this case as a classic case of who runs our government, who runs our society. Are we a government that actually uses our taxpayer dollars to fund pederast and pedophiles, human trafficking and arms trafficking and money laundering? Now, truth is, yeah, that's exactly what the CIA and Mossad and these other MI6 have been doing for a long time. But for the ordinary American, it's still a bit of a shock. Kind of like them assassinating presidents and presidential candidates and civil rights leaders in the 1960s. So all of this sort of comes together in the 2020s. And then people like Kash Patel, people like Dan Bongino, people like Pam Bondi, see its popularity amongst the grassroots, and they say, yeah, when we get into power, we're going to release all those Epstein files. We're going to show you who the other clients are. We're going to show who is getting blackmailed. We're going to show you who the intelligence agencies were connected to this. And this is a matter of transparency and honesty and bringing accountability to government. President Trump himself who had been friends with Jeffrey Epstein throughout the 90s, early 2000s. But as soon as he discovered his other habits, kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago, ratted him out to multiple publications, helped lawyers out him. He helped actually raise the Epstein issue initially because he knew it was effective against Bill Clinton, because one of Epstein's best buddies writing the Lolita Express, as they called that airline with its own little special bed in the back, was, of course, William Jefferson Clinton, along with people like Bill Gates, a bunch of Israeli prime ministers, prominent people across the world. And so Trump promises, I'm going to release those Epstein files. And they even say it's on Pam Bondi's desk. That's what Pam Bondi says. It's on her desk, which apparently has turned out to be the Bermuda Triangle of things that just disappear. I've been telling people, if you want to pay your taxes and never have to worry about it, the check getting cash, just say it's on Pam Bondi's desk. It'll disappear.
Send it to her. Right.
So
what part of the gal being in prison was connected to this list that we all of a sudden we don't have?
Well, what's extraordinary is just today they announced that for the first time ever, they're actually going to interview Ghislaine Maxwell. It's like, would have been nice if they would have done that, a few years ago. But they're going to. Now, you got to wonder about putting out a public announcement. Hey, we're going to interview her, a week or two before. I hope her insurance is at maximum rate. There at the federal facility she's in down in Florida. Put it this way, if she dies mysteriously, because somebody else, a famous Frenchman who was connected to a French modeling agency who was part of all this, got indicted in France. Guess what happened to him? He hung himself in jail. I mean, these people all disappear. I mean, it's worse than I call it the Clinton effect. It's worse than the Clinton effect. If you're within 2 degrees of the Clintons, your risk of death goes way, way up. If I was doing the insurance actuarial table, I couldn't insure anybody that was within 2 degrees of the Clintons. But this is even worse. If you're within 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees of the Epstein scandal, and you get in any kind of legal difficulty, you just have a habit of disappearing and usually dropping off a boat or hanging yourself. So
but the point there, and then we'll get back to kind of the whole story, was I'm trying to figure out if there is like a smoking gun. This list actually exists, or else the gal wouldn't be in prison to begin with.
So she's in prison because she was a nasty, mean person who facilitated. She bragged to people that she recruited. Well, here's how she put it to people that worked at the island. Because one of the mysteries of Jeffrey Epstein is where he got his money. Claimed to be a trader. Nobody can find any trading history at all. Claimed to be a money manager. Nobody can find any history of money managing at all. What he was really good at was money laundering. He had homes in Virgin Islands, New Mexico, Florida, New York, Paris, and some of the fanciest, richest homes in the world. He lived literally $1 billion lifestyle, and yet nobody knows where he got $1. As part of that, when Ghislaine Maxwell was down in the Virgin Islands and the St. James Island, where they did a lot of these events, where they had Prince Andrew come down and party with the folks and et cetera, she described herself to the aides. She said, you're going to see a lot of young girls here. They're the honeypot. I'm the queen bee. Don't forget. So that's the nature. And there was plenty of evidence she sexually harassed these women herself, molested some of these women herself. She was recruiting a constant parade of young women, often young girls underage, as young as 12 years old.
So my point there, Robert, and just you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, is if this was a nothing burger and this is just some sort of something that was just fabricated by the Democrats or whoever, pick a person or pick an entity, pick a group, then this gal wouldn't be in prison. The fact that she'd be in prison incorrectly, she would be innocent. The fact that if you believe she is in prison and she is guilty, then you also must believe this is not a nothing burger. Is that a fair statement?
Exactly. I think the way Elon Musk put it was, how disappointing for Jeffrey Epstein to kill himself right before he found out his whole case was a hoax.
Right, exactly.
And when is Ghislaine Maxwell getting out of prison? Because she clearly didn't traffic to anyone.
Exactly. Yeah. So why is Trump not pardoning her if this is all a big hoax?
Exactly. If it's a hoax like Russiagate was a hoax, then you have a lot of people who've been wrongfully libeled, a lot of people who've been wrongfully imprisoned, people who are wrongfully dead. It's really one of the most incredulous claims that I can imagine. The evidence in civil suits and criminal investigations of how extensive and expansive of a human trafficking, money laundering, blackmail, embezzlement, and extortion operation this is quite frankly as overwhelming as any case I've ever seen. So Trump,
how do we get here? Like, how do we go? Why, Robert, do we go from, okay, this is a big deal? I remember even Trump's kids are tweeting about this. I think it was Donald Jr., maybe a few months ago, saying, we got to get to the bottom of this. We got to get to the bottom of this. So how do we go from we got to get to the bottom of this, and this being topic number one for Pam Bondi and Bongino, I think his name is?
Yeah.
And all these people saying, hey, we've got to do everything that we can to bring this to justice, to then on a dime doing a complete and total 180. What is your theory as to how that happens?
There's multiple speculation. I think it's probably not a coincidence of the connection to Israel, that, for whatever reason, Trump has hitched his wagon to Bibi Netanyahu, who is in a lot of political trouble, facing corruption trials in Israel. And, Bibi's solution has always been war, more war, no matter what political problem he's facing. And here he's aligned himself with the hard right. And if he truly disclosed the Epstein files, the government that would be the most embarrassed by a long mile would be Israel. For example, most people don't know that Israel's no extradition policy extends to accused pedophiles. So if you're a pedophile in the United States or Canada or elsewhere in the world, and you happen to be Jewish, you can just flee to Israel and not face any prosecution. So I think a lot of Americans would be shocked to discover the kind of lengths that Mossad would go to. And especially that a lot of these girls were American girls from working class, poorer communities. So there's a class component of this as well. So that was the first initial speculation, was that for whatever reason, they discovered they were going to embarrass Israel if they fully disclosed the files.
But what does Pam Bondi care about that?
She's a deep supporter of Israel. It's the one thing that unites all of them. The chief of staff, Susie Wiles, is very tight with Bibi Netanyahu, Trump's chief of staff. Dan Bongino is a huge Israeli supporter. Kash Patel, huge Israel supporter. Pam Bondi, long-standing Israel supporter. The general sense I get is this came from the top. That for some reason, Trump hit a panic button and thought disclosing this information would be very destructive to him and his agenda and to his allies. And the question is, how did he suddenly come to that conclusion after 10 years of doing just the opposite? He was the one raising the issue. He was the one highlighting the issue. So many of his allies were as well. As you mentioned, his own son, Vice President Vance, repeatedly referenced it on the campaign trail. So one conclusion is they didn't realize it implicated Israel. And then they realized if they disclose anything, it could easily come back somehow to implicate Mossad. They didn't know what was tainted and what wasn't. So it led them to shut down everything. Second hypothesis is that the information wrongfully implicated President Trump, and that Trump thought that the files had been doctored, and then doctored in such a way as to implicate him. I find that hard to believe. I mean, although
just omit that. I mean, if you're Trump, if no one has this anyway, just redact it or admit it or omit it, and then send out the rest of the stuff and say, here you go, guys. Here's all the information that we have.
Bingo. And that's why I say, who would cause you to not want to disclose anything? It's when you don't know where it would lead. And that's not about protecting a person or even a group of people. That's about protecting intelligence agencies. That you don't know, if we disclose this financial transaction record, will some smart little grassroots nerd journalist online put it together with either the CIA or the MI6 or Mossad? I think that's what told me was they don't know where anything leads. They know it leads at some point to intelligence agencies. There was a great breakdown by the behavior language panel. Chase Hughes, these guys that, they watch your body language and they can figure out all these things about you. And they did the breakdown. They said everybody had a panic reaction in the cabinet room, including even President Trump himself, Pam Bondi, Secretary of State Rubio, when only one aspect of the Epstein case was raised. And it was when the reporter said, was he an asset of the intelligence community? All of a sudden, their eyes start clicking like this. Trump is, swallowing, double swallowing. So to me, it's clear. They didn't realize all this time that they were bragging about releasing the Epstein files, that Epstein was an asset of the intelligence community, arguably a creation of the intelligence community, protected by the intelligence community. He was able to do what he did in his individual criminality because of the intelligence community. And once they did realize it, they realized we got to shut this whole thing down. And they also wanted to send a message because they released this the day before Bibi Netanyahu shows up in the White House. So it seemed to be a message. Hey, everybody, everybody that could be implicated by this, don't worry anymore. This is totally shut down. We're not going to let it lead to any place, anywhere you don't want it to lead. We're not going to disclose anything more. They just didn't expect the public blowback that they got.
So it's kind of like a Jack Nicholson moment. And what I mean by that is you can't handle the truth. So Trump realizes it. Don and Pam Bondi and the Dan Bongino guy, they realize, holy shit, what did we just uncover? And if we actually allow the truth to come out, it's going to potentially rip the fabric of American society in a way that we can't repair. And
Exactly.
so therefore we're doing a cost benefit analysis, and the cost is our reputation. The cost is maybe the midterm. The cost is X, Y, and Z, but the benefit is American society isn't potentially destroyed. And it's almost like taking the risk of of World War III, a nuclear attack. It might be a 2 or 3% probability, but it's so catastrophic, you can't take that risk. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, exactly. Because if the whole world woke up to realize what some had suspected, but only whispered about in the shadows, or unless you're Alex Jones, you weren't talking about it much publicly.
Yeah.
The is that this is how nasty and pernicious and vicious people in power are. That they will treat young girls as assets to develop intelligence. And that they will be protected and promoted at the highest levels of political power, and that it will implicate people across both party lines. It will implicate people across national lines. And it would be a story that people could hammer around the global world, hammer the US, hammer the UK, hammer the Europe, hammer Mossad in Israel for what would be confirmed if the files were ever fully and honestly disclosed. And I think once they realize that, they're like, okay, it's cover-up mode. The problem is it was one of the most half-assed versions of a cover-up I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it's like, I don't mind corruption. I don't mind stupidity. Just don't put the two together, because when you get dumb criminals, that's when you get trouble.
But it seems to me that proves this. They didn't really realize what was going on to begin with, and this was kind of sprung on them, and they had to figure out something to say within a couple days or a week, and they just didn't have time to fully think this through and prepare, and therefore their excuses sound ridiculous.
Exactly. I mean, the smart move would have been the old classic move. We're going to employ a commission. This is so significant and so disturbing what we have discovered. We need a commission to investigate this for, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, right? Something like that. That's the normal cover-up protocol. Here, they panicked so badly. I think the other thing was somebody was putting pressure on them to communicate to the entire world, don't worry if you're on the Epstein list, it's going nowhere. That's really the only motivation for the timing and the breadth of their statement, to make it that broad. Hey, don't worry. If you're on that list, you can Prince Andrew he was already booking reservations outside of the UK. He was like, I can travel now. I won't get picked up on a random warrant someplace. So I think that was the timing instigator, and that forced them to do such a broad cover up that everybody could look at it and be like, everybody can see what this is. And so but you're right. I think
everyone can see what it is, but they can't prove it.
Correct.
So we just move on and just kind of sweep this one under the rug. That's the message. And so that post by Trump on Truth Social, where he was basically attacking his base. I mean, it was unbelievable. Even for Trump, it was unbelievable. That was kind of a dog whistle, in your opinion, to the higher ups that could have a lot of problems with this intel coming out, that coast is clear. You guys, although I might not like you, I don't like what you did, I'm still not going to release this, because at the end of the day, it would just be potentially too damaging to Western civilization.
Yeah, exactly. To the powers that be. That the whole system could come crumbling down if the world understood what Epstein truly revealed. And especially the Western world, the US, the UK, and Israel. That those would probably be the countries most badly implicated and would just morally horrify and shock people.
Yeah, because I think if it was just politicians, it
would be survivable. If it was just Bill Clinton, it'd be survivable.
Yeah, Trump would just be like, whatever, you guys made a mistake, and I'm going to look like a hero by revealing it to the general public and to my constituents. But it had to, it's that, but what went into that, the ramifications are just catastrophic. And what do you think would happen if what you're saying is true? Let's just assume that it was. and it came out tomorrow, everything came out tomorrow on WikiLeaks or something like that, or maybe not even that, because people would question the validity there, but it came out in the mainstream media that this is actually true. This is what happened, and they had all the proof to back it up. What do you think would happen over the next year?
Well, I think a lot of people would want our ruling elites to be Epsteined. And that would apply to a broad range of institutions. Second part is it would completely discredit once and for all and expose fully what is colloquially called the deep state, but this permanent state, this national security state apparatus that has been co-opting American power and resources to levy war around the world, that all of it would get fully taken home in a very individual way. That, why does that nasty, vicious, vile person get to harass and molest your local 14-year-old neighbor who just wants to be a model of her Victoria's Secret? Well, it's because he's helping the intelligence community launder money, traffic arms, human trafficking, smuggle information, smuggle people, smuggle assets to prop up the war machine. It would be one of the most damning, and it would be like what would happen if we ever had an audit of the Ukraine money. And if you got deep, all of a sudden you get into bioweapons. All of a sudden you get into human trafficking. Human trafficking capital of Europe. Most of the world for the last decade has been Ukraine. Number one place they've been doing bioweapons research has been Ukraine. You open that door and people get red-pilled to a degree they have never been red-pilled before. And the corrupt institutions that have been wielding power for now the better part of more than half a century suddenly get exposed in a way that the only comparable I could give to people is like if they did an honest, full disclosure of the Kennedy assassination and said, yeah, our intelligence agencies and military apparatus and elites decided to murder the man because he wasn't pro-war enough.
Yeah, so basically any trust that Americans have in the establishments and leadership all collapse.
Correct.
Almost instantly collapse, which leads to a level of social unrest that we may have never, ever seen, at least in our lifetimes. We definitely never, ever seen.
Yeah, I mean,
you got to go back to the French Revolution or something.
I've told people an honest disclosure of the Epstein scandal is bigger than any scandal in the last 300 years of Western history. You really can't find another scandal that could compare because of what it implicates, because of who it implicates, and because of how it implicates them. And you're talking about a half century of activity this guy was involved in. You had police in 5 different jurisdictions at the local, state, and federal level cover up for this guy. You had 4 different administrations cover up for this guy, and then cover up for his death, in ways that everybody knows is implausible and incredulous. So it would to me, it exposes the ugly underbelly of a system that needs to be exposed because it's a boil on our constitutional republic and liberty that it threatens us on a daily basis. But I can see how if you're an institutional actor, you see this is easiest trigger to revolution they could imagine. They don't want it, and as you pointed out, even if the risk is 50-1, that's way too high a risk given the degree of consequence that the system could face if they were fully had to face true judgment.
Wow. There's so much to this that I didn't realize because I just kind of see this at surface level. The next question I would have is, if this has been going on for 25 years or longer, I guess, and so many people have been involved, how is it possible, even if what you're saying is true about the downside risks and whatnot, how is it possible that no one has come out and blown the whistle on this entire thing? Or is it just the fact that any whistleblowers just get the Epstein treatment or the Clinton treatment?
What's interesting is some have, but they've been mostly ignored. Some of the girls have said this person, president, have pointed the finger at Bill Gates, pointed the finger at President Clinton, pointed the finger at former presidents and prime ministers of Israel, have pointed the finger at these kind of broad scale operations. But here, the way human trafficking succeeds is it mostly picks on vulnerable populations that have mental instability already. Right? They're not looking for the stable, secure. It's really not like the Taken movie. They're not really looking for the stable, secure person whose dad might be a former CIA agent. That's not their profile. They're looking for weak, vulnerable people who, most sexual assault victims never report it to anybody. I know it came up in the Lauren Southern Andrew Tate case, and everybody's like, oh, why didn't she report it right away? Well, it turns out she did. But even otherwise, like having represented a lot of victims, most of them never report it. So that's one way human traffickers get away with it. The second way they get away with it is that the people that they pick on often have other instability issues in their lives that make it easy to pick apart their credibility or trustworthiness. Often the abuse itself triggers a negative de-escalating form of conduct that basically puts them in a position down the road where they've got drug problems, alcoholism problems, et cetera. So this is how, and he was very good at targeting the right people in the right setting, right? Like a lot of the young models that got targeted, those people fear that if they say anything, their modeling career is done, finished, over. So that there's so many on the human trafficking side, that's how he got away with it. On the arms trafficking and money laundering side of it, well, he was doing it for the government. So there was no reason for the government to investigate and inquire because he was their asset, their agent all along.
Yeah, but what about one of these FBI individuals or one of these deep state individuals or one of the Bill Gates type or the bad guys that potentially was a client of Epstein on the plane or something like that? What about them just, on their deathbed or something like that, saying, look, I'm going to meet my maker. I want to come clean. And this is what really happened. How come we haven't seen anything like that either?
There's been a little bit of it. It just never reaches mainstream media because they're the sort of Operation Mockingbird gatekeeping control. Make sure that this story might exist, but it's only going to exist on Alex Jones. It's only going to exist in the conspiracy theorist out there. Like COVID was a crash course in this. Man, there are plenty of important established doctors saying this was garbage, but the normie never heard of them, never saw them. They were being censored and suppressed and being kicked out of campus and then blacklisted after that. And I think that's what would shock people the most. It would be, this could go on this long and I never know about it. That means so many people in power had to cover it up. That means our whole institutions are so corrosively corrupted, we can't even stop a pederast. I mean, it's the level of shock that people would reach at multiple levels that the Epstein case has always hinted at. That is how the system is able to suppress the truth and censor the truth. And they do it very, very well. I mean, think about the head of the KGB, Beria, who was literally raping a Russian girl every day he was in power. And yet somehow nothing happened in Russia to him until after he was literally killed, was taken out. And so the system works very effectively to make sure that if somebody raises a claim, and there have been some people, like there's a longstanding former whistleblower who was a top-ranking Mossad agent who said Robert Maxwell recruited Jeffrey Epstein in the mid-1980s to take over Maxwell's operation, part of which involved setting up honeypots. So he's out there. He has great credibility. He had a long, extensive history with the Mossad, but the media just blacklist him as if he doesn't exist. Like occasionally you'll get some random local station will cover him and you'll find the story somewhere buried in a YouTube archive. They haven't censored it and deleted it, but that's it. Otherwise, they do a very good job of controlling the narrative. No better example, they killed our American president right in front of us and hid the truth for 50 years.
It almost reminds me of financial markets in a sense that none of the evidence matters until it does, and then everything matters all at once. So as an example, leading up to the GFC, housing prices peaked in 2006 and then they started to go down. And then I've read many, many, many Wall Street journals from late 2007 and into 2008. And a lot of people were talking about the mortgage crisis, mortgage-backed securities. A lot of people were talking, but it was just kind of hush hush and everyone just didn't really pay any attention to it until the evidence became so overwhelming that now everyone pays attention to it and just freaks out. As that Jim Cramer moment. Remember when he was on CNBC? Yeah. They know nothing. He's just going completely mental.
Yes.
And it seems like we need something like that in this situation, where if we just kind of get this random drip of information, although it's crystal clear to people like you that study this stuff and really get in the weeds, it really isn't that big of a deal to the mainstream public or the average Joe and Jane, because it is just this drip that can be, let's say, contained and swept under the rug. But I mean, do you think we get to the point where there's so much information on this, because now it is such a hot topic, that we get to that moment where the evidence becomes so overwhelming that the normies actually get it, and then it becomes important all at once?
I'll give you a unique intersection of this. I was at a party in 2006, Kentucky Derby party, for a couple of high-ranking executives of Harvey Weinstein's company. And they were leaving Harvey Weinstein's company, and they wouldn't tell me why. We later found out why. There was a guy who was doing that for 35 years in Hollywood, and literally nobody would report on it, despite how systematic and crazy it was, including high-ranking, high-profile celebrities, the Salma Hayeks of the world. And while I was there, I talked to a guy who worked at the Federal Reserve, and he was explaining to me, don't get anywhere near U.S. real estate. He goes, it's way overpriced. He goes, it's way disconnected from people's ordinary incomes and rental value. Because I was looking at buying in Malibu at the time. And I was like, wow. I mean, of course, he nailed it, but this was 2 years before it became publicly acceptable narrative.
Yeah,
and
right.
so you're right. There needs to be something that breaks the dam. We've got this dam that's barely holding up, and all it's going to take is one more and bam. And that's what all the institutions in power are terrified of. That's what I think they terrified Trump into. Now, I think they may have misled Trump. Oh, they doctored the files and put you all in it as their tipping factor to get him to go along with suppressing it.
Right.
But the real reason the institutions want it suppressed is how damning it is of them. And they know the whole dam could break and their power structure disappear forever.
But now Trump's screwed, because even if he wasn't part of this whole process, even if he was one of the good guys, now he's a bad guy. Because if the dam does break, then everyone sees him as trying to hide the truth.
Exactly. It's kind of like what they've done with him in Ukraine. Drag him in just long enough that he can't get out. It's the old Godfather thing. Every time I try to get out, they drag me back in. They've done a good job of running a number on him and keeping him from doing real kind of positive change, and then implicating him if he tries to do positive change. What happens if he now tries to do the peace deal that was on the table for 6 months in Ukraine? Now it looks like he wussed out. Now it looks like he got soft. Now he looks like he got rolled by Putin. So they do a brilliant job of entrapping him in ways that he can't extract himself from. And it's a recurrent weakness of limitation of his in the presidency. But the Epstein case is just the latest illustration of it. And they had easy allies in the FBI because Bongino didn't have the guts, especially once he found out, this badly implicates Israel. That was the easy angle with Bondi, with Bongino, with Patel. They're such deep Israeli advocates that all they had to say is, this will damage Israel. It's unfair. It's unjust. The whole world will collapse on them right at the time they're fighting for their survival, is that narrative. That's why you all of a sudden, out of the blue, saw a bunch of people that wanted the Epstein docs suddenly say we shouldn't be talking about this anymore. And the one thing they had in common is they're all very pro-Israel and pro-war. So all of a sudden, Mark Levin's like,
so just so I'm understanding this correctly, so in their minds, their decision-making process is what we just found out is horrific. And ethically, morally, every cell in my body is against this. But I know if I release it, it goes back to everything that we were talking about Western civilization before and the fabric of society in the United States. But in addition to that, now all of a sudden, all the funding to Israel gets completely cut off. And then they're vulnerable, let's say, to Iran. And then the whole entire Middle East implodes and Israel gets wiped out.
Right.
So on that basis, along with everything else, there's just no way that I can let the general public know what I've just found out.
Exactly. Is losing Israel worth the Epstein files?
Right.
And for most of these people, they would say no. And that by itself would be sufficient. I think for Trump, they had to go further. To say this could lead to all kinds of places that we can't control. And by the way, they doctored the files, so you're all over them, even though there's no real reason to believe that about Trump. If Trump thought he was actually in the Epstein files, he never would have talked about it started talking in 2015. But they could tell him, those Democrats, they doctored the files. They're always up to some shenanigans and so forth. And it was kind of like the P. Diddy case. The P. Diddy case wasn't really a prosecution. It was a cover-up. And the goal was to use the prosecution to cover up the real crime, that he was systematically entrapping and extorting and blackmailing people using various forms of honeypot activity, including young and up-and-coming music performers, high-ranking music executives, but also high-ranking politicians. A certain Barack Hussein Obama liked to go to P. Diddy parties. So, what is you implicate enough people, it's such that almost that nobody can do anything about it because they don't know how far it reaches.
They're too big to fail.
I was going to say, it's how Trump described owing money. He goes, look, if I owe money to the bank, the bank owns me. Yeah. But if I owe a ridiculous amount of money to the bank, then I own the bank.
That's right.
It's that kind of twisted logic. And I think that best explains what the Epstein files have become and why we're unlikely to ever see meaningful disclosure.
So I haven't followed the P. Diddy thing at all either, other than just kind of a couple of headlines here and there and just some bizarre stuff. But you're telling me that with your research, you've come to the conclusion that P. Diddy was an Epstein type of figure, maybe by his, maybe not set up by the FBI or the CIA or something, but just based on his own decision making. Like he thought this would be a really good way to have leverage and to increase his clout and his power.
Exactly. And in fact, I think he was recruited into it. I had heard these stories from people within Hollywood going back a decade and a half, that this is who and what Diddy was. And that Diddy liked to entrap people and ensnare people for and that in fact, Diddy was Diddy because of this, that he was recruited into it at a young, even in his teenage years, he was connected to some of these operations, and that he was like Epstein was. He's recruited into it, solicited it, promoted it, and then he just makes sure he implicates enough people. And that what he most likely did is he upset the wrong people at the wrong place. So they arrest him. They seize all the files, just like the Epstein files. So now he no longer has control of the blackmail or extortion information. He can't ever publicly say, hey, I was extorting everybody, because then he goes to prison for life. And people won't necessarily believe him because of what he's been accused of. And here's the best way to understand the P. Diddy Epstein relationship. The same prosecutor prosecuted both of them, even though she had no proven background or experience in human trafficking prosecutions at this level. And her name is Maureen Comey. And her father is James Comey, the same James Comey who orchestrated Russiagate. So that gives you an idea that it's a small world and we're just not in it.
Jeez. It's just, yeah. Once you get to a certain level, it's like you're trained on extortion.
Yes.
And you're trained as to use extortion and all of these tactics that are, I don't even know how to describe it, that the average Joe and Jane would find utterly disgusting and repulsive. But you're trained to use that for, let's just say, the greater good. That's probably how you're sold on it. So with P. Diddy, your opinion is it's not like he was some sort of perv. It's that he knew what he was doing and he was strategically implementing this plan to gain leverage over certain individuals with an extreme amount of power, understanding that the more he did this, the more isolated he would be from prosecution or going to jail. But yet the more, the more power he would have with less of the downside. It's almost like you get to escape velocity.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to look at it? Like your risk is at the very beginning, before, when you're starting to extort all of these high profile people. But once you get to a certain, or maybe this is the thought process, once I get to that escape velocity, then I've got so much leverage and so many hidden camera videos or whatever it is on so many people that the probability of me going to jail, even if I get caught, is incredibly low. And the more I do it, the lower the probability that I actually do get convicted of XYZ crime.
Exactly. And it's what gives them the leverage to get business deals that often people look at and like, how did that happen? How did he get that artist to be on his label? How did he get that contract to promote that particular product? This is how. And then he knows he's got insurance, because if they try, they literally prosecuted him just like Epstein. They plan on prosecuting Epstein. They literally said he did trafficking to himself. It's like they accused him of being a pimp, and all they proved was he was a perv. And it's like, but clearly he was a pimp. Clearly he was doing these parties for other high-ranking people. They even went to great lengths to say, you can talk about this rapper who was at this party, but you can't mention them by name. Even though people put them together. And you can put them together. You'll find the Kardashians connected to this. I represented a client for a brief period of time on tax charges in LA that introduced me to this underworld. And I got out of that case as fast as I could. And by the way, that client was constantly trying to entrap me into his world. His understanding of power was even his own lawyer, he needed to have some leverage on. So he was always asking, he goes, hey, what's your address? I got some fun party favors. I'm like, no, I'm never giving you my address. And then the lawyer that replaced me, I told him, beware of this. And that lawyer started crying because he said, he's never done that for me. I was like, you got the wrong message, pal. You don't want to be involved in that world. You want to stay out of that world. It was like every client I ever had that lived in the Hollywood Hills. Always trouble. Always trouble.
Where are we with that case now, Robert?
Which one?
The P. Diddy thing.
Oh, he was acquitted of all serious charges. All he was convicted of was hiring a male prostitute. So he might get some crazy sentence. He should normally get released on time served. And he probably will ultimately when he goes up on appeal.
So slap on the wrist.
Yeah, he got to walk. He got to totally walk. And not only that, because of the way they brought the case as a RICO conspiracy trafficking case, nobody can prosecute him again in the future because it's double jeopardy bar on any charge. Even if they didn't present the evidence that someone else could find that proves he was a mass trafficker for 20 years, nobody can prosecute him. That's why you bring a broad conspiracy claim if you're the government in order to cover up the ability for any other prosecutor to come up and do an honest prosecution. He's basically
the prosecutor was likely in cahoots.
Oh, absolutely. That's what it was. The prosecution was the cover-up. Welcome to power.
Wow. Wow. So, man, I'm just completely blown away right now. Let's go back to Trump. What do you think this does to his base and midterms?
So right now, it's going to depend on some other things. If they get some sort of accountability or transparency, either in the Russiagate space and the January 6th space and all the lawfare that was taking place, especially under the Biden administration, going after crypto, the Roger Ver case, classic example of that. Bitcoin Jesus follows the tax laws, follows the rules that his accountants tell him to follow. His attorney-client privilege records get stolen. The records prove what he did was entirely consistent with his attorney's advice. So instead, the prosecutors lie about it to state courts, federal courts, foreign officials, and indict him on bogus charges. The fact that case is still lingering is an embarrassment to the Trump administration. So maybe if they do enough proactive actions in those areas, they can gain enough of the confidence of the country to at least stay stable, to not fall through the floor like, say, George W. Bush 2007. And avoid a war overseas and avoid stupid secondary sanctions that could blow up on the U.S. economy, like Trump is actually considering doing right now in September, 100% secondary sanctions on the Russian oil. And if that works, it sends oil prices skyrocketing, cost of living goes up, energy, as you've been covering, number one reason that number one input cost that goes, the tariffs and other things, there can be some limitations to how easily that is transferred to customer prices, not energy. Oil prices go up, your cost of living is going up. That's one guarantee for the last half century. And the number one thing that's led to cost of living coming down, as you've been pointing out, energy costs, double-digit declines in the first 6 months under President Trump. He could reverse all of that if he were in a snap, if he were to put 100% sanctions on Russian oil. So, or if he just gets involved in another war. It was risky enough just bombing Iran. If he gets stuck in that, if he gets stuck in Ukraine, you got generals wanting to wage war with Russia and China and Iran all at the same time. That's how nuts these guys are. They're like pre-World War I, all the great empires that thought they were about to conquer the whole world. And what happened? Austro-Hungarian, Russian, Turkish, Ottoman, British Empire, all gone within 5 years after that war. So there's all these big, huge landmines in front of Trump. If he can avoid those landmines and deliver something on transparency and accountability, then they can really hold water. They might still lose the House, but not lose the Senate in the midterms. He can stay in the mid-40s in approval and be able to get through most of his agenda.
What if this gal comes out and just totally spills the beans?
I'm very curious what she's up to. There's so many ways to game that, though. Like if you're Ghislaine Maxwell, you're not talking unless they give you what's called queen for a day immunity. And nobody better fits queen for a day than the queen bee herself, Ghislaine Maxwell. And what that does is it gives you what's called uses and fruits immunity. So it says anything you tell us in this, we can't ever use against you in any subsequent criminal proceeding.
Right.
But they have not said they're going to do that for her. If not, then she has no incentive to be forthcoming or honest at all. She may be trying to leverage this, saying, hey, give me a pardon and I'll tell you whatever story you want me to tell, right? That's what I suspect is behind the scenes. I think she's the one who leaked that card that supposedly Trump sent, birthday card sent to Epstein. She was the one who organized that birthday party. I don't think that was Trump sending that card, but I think she's the source of it. So I think that was her sending a message to Trump. If you want me to sing from your hymn book, you need to give me a pardon, not use and fruits immunity to testify honestly. I don't want that. Give me a pardon so I can get out of jail, because it turns out this was all one big hoax, like you said, Mr. President. I think that's the subtle sub rosa pitch she's making to them and what she really wants. So the devil is truly in the details in this thing. I don't think they have any intention of her ever honestly testifying. I mean, to be honest with you, putting on broadcast that at some point in the future, you're going to go talk to her to ask her the whole truth, when she's in a custodial setting where anybody could whack her on a given day. It was kind of like Israel gave a special gift, Bibi Netanyahu, to Trump, said, here's a golden pager, like the ones that we use to blow people up. I mean, is that the kind of gift you would want, George? Here's something that I used to blow up the last people who took this gift.
Okay, so let me just piece this together. So who is actually going to this gal and saying, I always forget her name, but going to this gal and saying, hey, we want you to testify. We want you to give us all this information. Because why would Trump want that? He would want the opposite. They would want to silence this gal. I mean, I think why isn't she doing the opposite? Why isn't she saying, if you don't pardon me, then I am going to tell everything?
I think that's what's happening just under the radar. So she's been, and I think what she started to do is selectively leak to the press that she will continue to say Trump is deeply involved in Epstein scandals unless they, and then they're like
a message to Trump saying, hey, if you don't like this Wall Street Journal article or wherever it came out, this is one of many, my friend.
Exactly.
And if you don't pardon me, or if I'm not on the list to get released or whatever it is, then this is going to be a part of your life until the day you die.
And she learned from a master. Robert Maxwell was one of the great information launderers of all time. So, and her case is almost exhausted. It's at the Supreme Court level. Looks like Supreme Court won't take her case. So she's almost all out of legal remedies. So it's time to play the last political cards available to her. So I think that's what's taking place. Bondi is the one. Now, people call her Pam Blondie, Pam Barbie. They have various nicknames for her, reflecting the fact that she seems sort of ditzy, which, to be honest, she kind of is. But she's more corrupt than she is ditzy. When she was the Florida Attorney General, remember all those auto pen scandals before the Biden administration in the home mortgage industry? Remember that in Florida? Guess who covered it all up so that none of them face criminal consequences? Pam Bondi. So she knows how to work the corrupt networks. That's what she's really good at. She's not good at prosecuting people. She's not good at exposing the deep state. None of that is in her DNA at all. That was all a BS routine for the Fox News BoomerCon audience. In truth, what she's really good at is covering things up. The reason why Trump trusts her is when Trump organization got into some controversy about like the charitable operations, the foundations, the Trump game, the Trump University, all that stuff. One of the principal cases was in Florida. She was the one who made all those cases go away. Ever since then, Trump has liked her as being personally loyal and reliable. So that's why I have no confidence this is going to go into an honest direction. And as we speak, the Speaker of the House is shutting down the House so that there can be no vote on releasing the Epstein files until after Labor Day. So if Ghislaine Maxwell is both alive and unpardoned after Labor Day, then we might be in a very interesting dynamic. But I wouldn't bet on either one of those things, unfortunately, come Labor Day.
Wow. All right, buddy. As always, it's how do I even say this? It's fascinating and at the same time terrifying to have a conversation with you.
Yes, indeed. Who knew? Columbia, for all of its issues, is a far safer place at every level than Washington, D.C. is.
Yeah, buddy. Well, thanks for coming on. How can people find out more about what you do?
Sure. So for all the law and politics analysis, that's at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. For the political prediction markets, going to have some bets up on the Bolivian elections upcoming. Among other things, that's at sportspicks.locals.com. And and for all the legal work for the Amish farmer on financial freedom, political freedom, medical freedom, food freedom, that's at 1776lawcenter.com. That's where you can stay up to date on all of those issues, legislative proposals, high profile cases in the news, etc. That's where you can get all of that information as well.
Okay. All right, buddy. We'll see you next time.